Chapter 13. Dawn gasped, stumbling back and almost falling off the front step. What? How? She stammered. Yeah, if you think you're surprised. Jake rolled his eyes, which were bloodred, other than the iris and pupil. Happy birthday to me, right? Dawn couldn't do anything but stare for a moment. Jake's skin looked like moldy mayonnaise. His hair had come out in tufts. His left shoulder hunched up, making him look lopsided. Zombie smell wafted off him. Even while Dawn's mouth still hung open in shock, her logical mind had already worked out what had happened. He'd changed. And not mildly like Luneth either. He was even worse than Graham or Uncle Charlie. How could I have forgotten it was his birthday today? She got. I mean their birthday. Jane. She choked out. Jake nodded. She's zombied out too. Pretty crazy that we were both in that unlucky 2%, huh? He glared at his father, who was still standing there hanging on to the door frame. Jake. Mr. Donovan began softly. Jake ignored him. So anyway, you probably want to get away as fast as possible, he told Dawn with a frown. Don't worry, I totally understand. It's mine. As he hesitated for a second. It's been nice knowing you. Dawn swallowed hard, and for once it wasn't because of extra phlegm. He was right. She wanted to run away and never look back. She wanted to forget she'd ever seen Jake like this. Especially when she got about her own birthday coming up a week from Sunday. Would she end up the same way? Jake. Don't be rude. Mr. Donovan finally seemed to wake up from his daze. I'm sure Dawn doesn't feel that way. It's not as if you're the first expressed zombie she's ever met. Would you like to come in, Dawn? Dawn hesitated for only a second. Jake was watching her, and she didn't want to hurt his feelings. Sure, thanks. She stepped inside, glad her perfume hadn't worn off yet. Zombie smells didn't bother her that much anymore, but Jake's was pretty strong. Well, Mr. Donovan said faintly. I've got work to do, so. His voice drifted off as he hurried out of the room, leaving Dawn alone with Jake. Jake stared at her, a hint of suspicion in his eyes. But there was something else too. Relief. She wasn't sure. She didn't like staring too long into those red-rimmed eyes. So where's Jane? She asked. Hiding in her room. She's not taking this well. As you probably could have guessed. A ghost of a smile flitted across Jake's green-mottled face. Come on, let's see if we can get her to come out. At first Jane refused to let Dawn see her. It took almost 10 straight minutes of Jake pounding on her door before she finally swung it open. Fine. She exclaimed, glaring at Dawn and Jake. If you want to see how hideous I am, help yourself. Dawn tried not to let her shock show. Jane looked just as bad as her twin. You don't look that bad, she lied. I mean, it's not like you two are the only zombies I've ever seen, right? Jake chuckled politely, but Jane scowled. Don't use that word, she snapped. What zombie? Jake rolled his eyes. Get real. It's what we are, okay? So deal with it. Shut up. Jane glared at him. As drool dripped down Jane's chin, Dawn realized saliva was building up again in her own mouth. She swallowed it quickly. So was your dad surprised? She asked, not sure what else to say. She wanted to ask how it felt, how exactly it had happened. But she didn't quite dare. She wasn't sure the twins were ready to talk about that. I don't know. Sort of. Jake shrugged, though the motion looked strange with his newly hunched shoulder. But he admitted our percentages weren't as low as we always got. Turns out our mom did have some zombie blood after all. Really? Dawn glanced at Jane, who was staring at the floor. Wow, that's crazy. Yeah. Jake picked at the hem of his shirt. Just goes to show, you never know. Jane glanced at Dawn. We had a super low percentage. Surprise. She grimaced, allowing a trickle of drool to escape. You probably shouldn't assume you're safe, either. Especially after the way your parents didn't tell you the truth until a few months ago. Who knows if they told the truth about your percentage, either, right? Jake frowned at his sister. Don't take it out on Dawn. She's not going to turn like we did. Dawn wanted to tell them the truth about her percentage. At least she knew she had a high chance of turning next weekend. The twins had been sure they were safe. They'd been totally blindsided. But would telling them now make the twins feel better minus? Or worse? Not the right moment, she told herself. This is about them, not me. It was obvious how shocked and miserable the twins were, which made her feel sorry for them. But then, Dawn still wasn't sure what to say to them, and they all just ended up sitting around awkwardly for a while. A clock somewhere in the house struck 4 o'clock. Suddenly, Dawn remembered something, and relief flooded through her. Oh, she said. I'm supposed to be meeting Luna outside right now. We have a writing lesson. She stood up. So I should go. Sorry. It's okay. Jake smiled weakly. Thanks for coming over. Dawn headed for the door. Sure. Happy birthday. She winced and shot them a look. You know? Yeah, Jake said softly as Jane rolled her red-veined eyes. See you later. See you. Dawn took a deep breath as she escaped from the house. That had been seriously uncomfortable. But she would have to think about it later. She could see Luna waiting outside her house. Dawn was pretty busy for the next week. So busy she didn't have time to stop in and see the twins. At least that was what she told herself. She got about them every time she saw their house though. And every time her father grumbled about driving her all the way down to East Valley for school. Let's go, he said on Friday morning, swiping his keys off the bench. You're going to be late if we don't leave now. Coming. Dawn glanced over at the Donovan house as she hurried toward the car. What were the twins doing right now? What had they been doing all week? She knew from talking to Luna that they hadn't turned up at Vespertine Academy yet. And they definitely weren't showing their new faces down in East Valley. Everyone there got they had mono. Dawn shuddered, turning away from their house and hurrying to the car. Her own 13th birthday was on Sunday, just 2 days away now. Was she going to be like the twins soon? She ended up stumbling through her morning classes in a daze. By the time she entered the cafeteria, she'd figured out exactly how many hours, seconds, and minutes were left before she turned 13 and discovered her fate. Dawn. Hurry up. Zach spotted her coming and waved. Yasmin and Xander waved too. For a second, Dawn wasn't sure why they all looked so excited. Then she remembered with a feeling of dread, it was the day of the prank. She'd been so distracted by the twin surprise change that she'd almost forgotten about it. Are you psyched? Yasmin asked, grabbing Dawn's arm. This is going to be epic. Xander grinned. My mom almost caught me leaving with 8 rolls of toilet paper, he said. I had to pretend to spot a bald eagle at the bird feeder to distract her long enough to get out of the house. The others laughed loudly. Dawn could barely crack a smile. This just doesn't feel the same without the twins, she said. Maybe we should minus. I meant to ask you about them, Zach interrupted. You live right next door, right? Have you seen them? Yeah, how are they doing? Yasmin put in. I emailed Jane, but she never wrote back. I don't know. Dawn shrugged and busied herself unwrapping her sandwich. I mean, I heard they're really sick, so they're probably not up to emailing and stuff. Oh. Yasmin took a sip of her juice. Anyway, Liz 10. Where should we meet up with you tonight? My sister said she'd drive the three of us up there. She gestured vaguely in the direction of the mountain. I know, Zach said. We could meet by that weird stone sign. Have you guys seen it? Xander nodded. Great idea. It's far enough out minus side of town that nobody will see us. Yasmin glanced at Dawn. What do you think? Is it close enough to walk to Z Corp from there? Dawn sniffled and chewed her lower lip, trying to work up the courage to say she didn't want to do it. Could she pretend to not know the way through the woods by herself? It wouldn't be that much of a stretch. She wasn't extremely familiar with the woods. Then again, letting them go alone might be worse. Suddenly she noticed Xander staring at her and felt a stab of panic. Xander was pretty smart. Had he figured out what she was hiding? What? She asked. I hope you didn't catch mono from the twins, he said, scooting his chair a little farther away from Dawn's. You sound really stuffed up right now. I do. Dawn cleared her throat, realizing the phlegm and saliva had built up again. Was she getting so accustomed to drooling that she didn't even notice it anymore? It's probably just allergies. She bent over her food, pretending to be totally focused on picking the poppy seeds off her bagel. Her birthday was only 2 days away, and the drooling symptoms were worse than ever. After seeing what had happened to Jake and Jane, there was no way she could avoid the truth. She was becoming a zombie. The thought distracted her so much that she never quite got around to backing out of the prank. When the bell rang to end lunch period, Yasmin jumped out of her seat. See you tonight by the sign, Dawn. Dawn opened her mouth, searching for the words to say she was out. But it was too late. The others were already gone,